The Arkham games have a DLC problem. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. It's insane to think these games have any problems, right? Well, I think they do, and I think I can fix it. But before we do that, let's take a trip down memory lane and look at the Arkham series DLC. Historically, starting back in 2009, Arkham's DLC first kicked off with a playable character, which is a pretty big step forward in terms of DLC, and that playable character was none other than the Joker. Now, the Joker was initially a PS3 exclusive character, but later would be available on all platforms, even being bundled in with the Return to Arkham edition of Batman Arkham Asylum, allowing Xbox players to play as the Clown Prince of Crime. Between August 21st, 2009 and May 11th, 2010, Arkham Asylum got 14 new challenge maps added. Now, some of these were historic maps from the original game, reskinned so you can play as the Joker within them. However, most of them were actually new maps playable as the Dark Knight himself. Come 2011 though, Batman Arkham City would release. And I need a drink. Dear chat, dear basketball. From the day I first picked up a ball, I fell in love with this game. Where's everyone going, basketball? Okay. Come 2011 and the release of Batman Arkham City, it too would see a lot of DLC released for it, mainly alternate suits, and I think personally Arkham City did alternate suits the best. With a large majority of cutscenes being pre-rendered movies, it meant that the actual suit the player wore in the game wasn't as big of an issue, because in the pre-rendered cutscenes, it would be the normal base Arkham City suit anyway. This meant Rocksteady could have a lot more freedom with how they did their suits. We can look at the Dark Knight Returns suit, the animated series suit, and the Batman Beyond suit as three examples of suits which initially were completely different designs from the original game suit. This included new cowls, new faces, new art designs, and even new shading in the case of the animated series suit. This meant the game had ultimate freedom in what it chose to give the player to play as in gameplay. Outside of this though, Arkham City also got a huge amount of new playable content, including challenge maps and story expansions. The Catwoman bundle, for example, came with the game upon a pre-order or could be bought separately, and actually introduced new segments to the story. And it also came bundled with 2 extra suits, her Batman the Animated Series suit and the Long Halloween variation of Selina Kyle. This extra story expansion has since become bundled within all future releases of Batman Arkham City, but initially it's quite easy to forget that it was a DLC, and fun fact, it's a DLC that I didn't have for a very long time. So I had to keep pressing the continue without Catwoman button on the main menu every time I wanted to play Arkham City as a child, which was soul destroying, until I actually played it. Then I realised I didn't really miss out on much, because I'm not a big fan of it, especially the Two-Face boss fight. That sucks. The rest of it's alright actually, I take that back. But the Two-Face boss fight, that's not even funny. That sucks. Batman Arkham City also got a Nightwing bundle. This came with the Wayne Manor challenge map and the Main Hall challenge map, and obviously a playable Nightwing and an alternate suit for the original Boy Wonder. It then received a Robin bundle pack, which again came with new challenge maps, 2 new suits for the Boy Wonder, then we got a skin pack which contained 7 suits, then we got a standalone Batman Inc. release for a suit, and then we got Harley Quinn's Revenge, probably the best DLC in the game. Harley Quinn's Revenge is one of my favourite pieces of playable content in the series. I've done a whole video explaining why I love it so much and the different things it does with Robin, with Harley, and even with Batman. But it didn't come as standard with the game, it came as a DLC, which is a shame, but it does show that Arkham has had very, very good story DLC, and the trend doesn't end there. Before we look at that trend though, it's worth saying that Arkham City clearly took inspiration from Asylum's DLC model, offering new playable characters and loads of new challenge maps. This meant that the game stayed pretty fresh throughout, and some of those DLC challenge maps have become pretty iconic. I mean, Wayne Manor, Main Hall, the Batcave, Joker's Fun Ground, like all of these maps are so cool. The Black Mask DLC, I forgot about that one. They're all so fun. But what about Batman Arkham Origins? Because Batman Arkham Origins has a lot of DLC. Origins would release 2 years later in 2013, and with it came a whole host of DLC. This DLC was split across 7 months, 2 separate game modes, and 9 different purchasable packs. And this kind of marked a new generation for the Arkham series, because at this point, players were pretty used to having to fork out money for extra content within video games, so this made sense and followed industry trends at the time. This DLC featured a playable version of one of the assassins from the main campaign, Deathstroke, aka Slade Wilson, and it also came with a new playable version of Batman. Well, kind of, but you get to play as Bruce Wayne before he officially became the Dark Knight. It would also have 15 different versions of Batman, 2 extra versions of Deathstroke, 2 extra Robin suits, and an alternate appearance for Bruce Wayne. It also came with a bunch of new playable challenge maps and content, including Bruce Wayne's Initiation DLC, which is a really sort of weird campaign-y DLC challenge map thing bundled into one, which goes a really long way into showing us how Bruce Wayne became Batman through his training. It would also obviously give us the Deathstroke challenge maps and the Nightfall DLC, which is an often overlooked DLC in Arkham Origins which takes inspiration from the titular story, Nightfall. This Nightfall DLC would feature a ton of new challenge maps, some remade from older games, and some just reskinned from Arkham Origins. It would let the player experience Arkham's version of Nightfall, and although it isn't canon, it is pretty cool and goes a long way into giving the player more content. And obviously, Cold Cold Heart was also within Batman Arkham Origins, and that is probably the best Arkham DLC ever. All of that to say, we got a lot of additional content within Arkham Origins. We got so many new suits, we got things for the online mode, we got story expansions, we got challenge maps, and we got new playable characters, not just 1 or 2. This means that Arkham Origins DLC at this point was probably the most advanced DLC we'd seen from the Arkham series. This, however, brings us to 2015's Batman Arkham Knight. Now by this point, the industry standard was DLC. Everyone was accustomed to shelling out a little bit of money if it meant getting new skins or new playable content. But Arkham Knight's DLC is very interesting, because its highs are extremely high, and its lows, well, we'll get into that. Now let's start with the good, because I think there is actually a lot more good than there is bad within Arkham Knight Season Pass and DLC. Starting off with Season of Infamy, and wow, this is probably one of the top 3 Arkham DLCs of all time. It is that good. It offers 4 new side missions within the open world, each featuring a legacy character from the series. And these side missions would take place within new locations within the game's map. Well, mostly anyway. Mad Hatter's has the least amount of new locations, but still, that bit where you're in the book and you're fighting through the old Arkham games, that is probably enough by itself to warrant this being one of the best DLCs in the series. Beneath the Surface sees Batman and Nightwing fight Killer Croc in the fallen Iron Heights Penitentiary. Wonderland sees Batman fight the Mad Hatter for the 3rd and final time in the series. Mr. Freeze and his wife Nora both appearing in From the Cold, which is one of the most emotional storylines in the entire franchise. And Batman takes on the League of Assassins within Shadow War. All 4 of these side missions last about 20 minutes for an inexperienced player, and honestly, they're some of the best stories in Arkham Knight, and for me personally, I always look forward to replaying these in new saves. They go such a long way into giving goodbyes to these legacy characters who didn't quite make the cut for the main game. Some of this DLC is even still spoken about to this day, over a decade after the game's release. Shadow War comes to mind as a mission which sparked a lot of controversy within the community, because at the end of the DLC, you get to decide whether Batman gives Ra's al Ghul the cure and potentially revives him to full health, and thus revives the League of Assassins to full power, or you can opt to not give him the cure and let him die, which some would see as breaking Batman's moral code. It's a really interesting ending to the DLC story, and again, one of the best moments in the franchise that still has debate surrounding it to this day. In addition to Season of Infamy, we also got A Matter of Family, a story DLC which sees Robin and Batgirl head to the Seagate amusement park to rescue Commissioner Gordon and a load of cops from Harley Quinn and the Joker, under the pretense that if Batman shows up, everyone's pretty much gonna die. This DLC gives us a new area to explore, new lore taking place between Arkham Shadow and Arkham Asylum, and obviously a new duology of characters to play as, because although we had already played as Robin at this point in the main campaign, we now get to team him up with his future wife, Barbara Gordon, which does make for some awesome team takedowns, and I personally think, shoot me here, I don't care, I'm standing on this, Batgirl has some of the best takedowns in this series. Some of them are so comically brutal that I just can't help but love them. And outside of even that, we got so many new skins, over 40, spanning over Batman, Robin, Nightwing, not Azrael, Catwoman, Harley Quinn, Red Hood. We got so many new skins and new ways to customize the game. And that's not even touching on the Batmobile skins. We got the 2016 Batmobile, the 1989 Batmobile, the 1966 Batmobile, the original Arkham Batmobile. So many new ways to really make Arkham Knight feel like the ultimate Batman game. And then there's all the challenge maps. I know, I've been going on about Arkham Knight's DLC for so long, but it has so much content. Arkham Knight has an insane amount of content. It's one of my favourite things about the game, because even the base game has so much playable stuff in it that it's hard to be bored. It has so many new challenge maps, so many new racetracks, so many, it's just got so much. I've gone off script here because I'm getting really passionate about this, but Arkham Knight has so much amazing content, and it's really, really hard to critique it. However, that isn't to say it's free from critique, because some of it, well, some of it kind of sucks. We've spoken about how good Arkham Story DLC usually is. A Matter of Family, Cold Cold Heart, hell, Catwoman's DLC probably belongs in this category. But what happens when you take all that DLC, strip it of all substance and bundle it into 10-minute packages? Well, you get these. The Arkham episodes, and oh boy, wow, these kind of suck. Harley Quinn, Nightwing, Red Hood, Catwoman and Robin all get new playable DLC campaigns. And now when I say campaigns, I don't really mean campaigns, because they're not very long, and that is the main issue with them, and that's what I'm kind of here to try and fix today. See, as good as these are, they aren't perfect. They're fun, they're interesting little 10-minute romps into the characters, but they're not amazing. Robin's DLC actually probably presents the most interesting idea out of these story packs. It presents a Gotham post-Batman's death, and that means there's a massive power vacuum within the city left by the Bat, which means Nightwing, Robin, Red Hood, Azrael, all of these characters are running about trying to protect the city, but Tim Drake feels it the most, as he feels he should step up and be more like Bruce Wayne. It's a genuinely interesting idea, because Nightwing is typically the one to step up and become that Batman-like figure, often even wearing the suit. However, here it's all falling on Tim Drake, and I think that's really interesting. It's also interesting that the villain choice for this story is Two-Face, because in the same way Two-Face deals with these ideals of justice and crime, Robin is dealing with this mental battle of being more like Batman and losing everything, and not losing everything, and being more like himself and more like Robin, which his now wife, Barbara Gordon Drake, tries to steer him towards rather than letting him become Bruce Wayne. Because as we see in these games, Bruce Wayne is very closed off and very emotionally dry, and obviously his wife doesn't want him to become like that. So with that all out there, it's clear that this DLC has some really interesting things to say, and honestly, it's probably my favourite outside of the Arkham episodes, aside from obviously A Matter of Family. However, there's one issue with it. It runs for 11 minutes, and I know this because my last recording of it was 11 minutes long. It might have been 11 minutes and 56 seconds. The point is, maximum this DLC takes 15 minutes, and I don't care how good of a writer you are, that is not long enough to fit a message as cool as this into a story. If these story packs were given more time, they could have been so cool and really fleshed out the world post-Batman's death. I mean, look at A Matter of Family. It takes about 35 to 45 minutes to complete, and it's one of the most memorable DLCs in the game because of how much it does for its characters. It gives us a look at Batgirl as, well, Batgirl and not Oracle. It gives us a look at that relationship between Batgirl and Commissioner Gordon, and how Barbara tries to hide her identity from her father. It also gives us a look at the relationship between Tim Drake and Barbara Gordon as a crime-fighting duo. It's a really cool DLC, and it really gets a lot of life from the fact it has time to breathe and time to tell you what it wants to tell you, something these other DLCs don't have. Nightwing and Red Hood's DLC stories also fall into this category. Again, these could have been really cool post-Batman Gotham stories, showing us how Nightwing and Red Hood deal with the fact there is no more Batman. And obviously, with Nightwing being the leader of the family now, that could have made for some really interesting character moments, especially when paired with the fact that Jason Todd, now operating under the alias of the Red Hood, is running around out there killing criminals. It could have been so cool, but again, they just weren't given enough time. I'm not even going to bother going into depth with Harley Quinn's DLC because it kind of sucks. Like, I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion because I've never spoken to anyone about this, but I really don't like this DLC. Not the story. I think the story's fine. It's kind of cool to see how Harley breaks Poison Ivy out. It's this. It's the Nightwing boss fight. What is this? Why is Harley Quinn beating Nightwing in a fist fight? It's so weird. And then there's obviously like Catwoman's DLC, which is also kind of cool, but again, the final fight is just so boring and so annoying. Like, it's annoyingly hard. I don't know if it was play tested. It can't have been, because who thought having all these lasers was a good idea? It's bizarre. But again, the point stands. If these DLC stories had more time, they'd have been able to get their messages and their stories across a lot better. And unfortunately, well, they don't do that very well in the time they are given. I do, however, have a fun fact about these DLC stories. They were actually developed by WB Montreal, and I know what you're thinking, oh, I've heard that name before. You have heard that name before, because they developed Batman Arkham Origins and all of its DLC, which shows they can do DLC stories very, very well. Look at Cold Cold Heart, probably the best DLC in the series, and it has an amazingly beautiful open world. Admittedly, an open world we'd already played in, but it just looks and feels so different. It's clear WB Montreal know how to write good Batman stories and know how to make good DLC. But given the fact that these DLCs run for about 10 minutes each, maybe 20 minutes if you're not very good, it was really hard to cram any sort of emotional impact into that. So, since I have the time to write these stories, I'm going to take you through how I would have done Robin, Nightwing and Red Hood's DLC. Because if these were done in the CCHQ studios, which is here, it's this green screen, then they would have been a lot different, and I think personally a lot better. Now, it's worth mentioning, first of all, I'd cut Harley Quinn's DLC, but I actually would keep Catwoman's. I think Catwoman's is like the best of the bad bunch, kind of. Like, it's fun hearing Riddler seethe when you beat him, so I think for that reason it has to stay. But Harley Quinn's would be cut to allow more development time for what I'm coining Batman Arkham Legacy, which would be a 3-person DLC following the story of Robin, Nightwing and Red Hood following the events of Batman Arkham Knight. The main villain for this DLC campaign would be, drumroll please, Black Mask. Ta-da! Black Mask and the False Face Society. Or any gang that you want to include with Black Mask. I just think he needs a gang. He's a mob leader, it makes sense. I'd have Black Mask essentially run Gotham at this point. With Penguin still in prison and Two-Face out of the picture, I'd have Black Mask positioned back to where he was in Arkham Origins, as the big bad of Gotham, the big mob leader trying to bring back the good old days of mob crime and mob families. And this would force Robin and Nightwing to work together to bring him down, until a mysterious third player enters the fray. This third player would obviously be Jason Todd, the Red Hood, and if you couldn't tell already, I'm basically doing Arkham's version of Under the Red Hood. The only differences are, I'm not going to position Jason Todd's identity as a mystery. I think the player already knows who it is, and let's be honest, they already did that reveal in the story, and it wasn't very good. So I would position Robin, Nightwing and Red Hood as my 3 protagonists, and obviously we know Arkham isn't afraid to take influences from outside sources. Arkham Asylum takes huge inspiration from Serious House, Arkham City takes inspiration from No Man's Land, Origins takes bits from Nightfall and The Killing Joke. There's so many different inspirations that Arkham wears on its sleeve, and I think adding one more to that list, especially one as iconic as Under the Red Hood, would do nothing but strengthen this story. Now, sorry to disappoint you, but this isn't a rewrite video. I don't have a script on how exactly I would write this beat for beat, but I do have some notes on how I'd like to do this. So first of all, we'd open up with Nightwing being the main protagonist to begin with. He would basically be trying to step up and become the leader of the family, something he's never done before, and I'd also allude to the fact that he hasn't been in the Teen Titans for a very long time, because I think the Teen Titans are cool, and I think they'd be really cool in the Arkham universe, and just to have them mentioned would be really fun. I don't know if they are mentioned anywhere in the game. I don't think they are. I will fact check that. But yeah, I'd have Nightwing step up to be the leader and Tim Drake be sort of the plucky underdog. So by that, I mean Tim Drake would spend this entire DLC trying to one-up Nightwing, trying to be Bruce Wayne, trying to be Batman. All the while, Dick and his now wife, Barbara Gordon, are telling him to just stop. He doesn't need to do that. He doesn't need to be Batman. No one wants him to be Batman because eventually Batman's mission cost him everything. And this is where I'd also enter Red Hood. As I've already said, Red Hood's identity would not be a mystery to the player. We'd already done that reveal in the main story, and again, I think Red Hood's an iconic enough character now to the point where revealing him as Jason Todd in a DLC, it's just not that interesting. We all know it's Jason Todd. Even if you don't read comics, you know Red Hood is Jason Todd. He's kind of an established part of Batman's lore at this point, believe it or not. So yes, this isn't a mystery. However, to introduce these three characters to each other, I'd have Tim and Dick on a mission in one of Sionis's warehouses, taking out a drug smuggling organisation or a gun running organisation or something along those lines. They'd crash through the roof, you'd get some tag team combat, and then about halfway through the fight, enemies would just start dropping left and right. They'd just start getting shot and killed, and Tim and Dick would stop and kind of look around and be like, what the hell's going on here? And that's when Jason Todd would enter the scene, and they'd have this standoff where Jason would sort of allude to knowing who Tim and Dick are, but obviously Tim and Dick don't know who he is. I'd have it done this way because although I would imagine Alfred probably logged the fact Jason Todd was alive after Batman told him the Arkham Knight was Jason Todd, I don't want Nightwing and Robin to know this. I know it's a bit cheap, and I know it's kind of lazy to do the, oh my god, my brother's alive kind of thing, but I do kind of like the idea that Nightwing and Robin are like surprised at the fact it's Jason, and there'd be this really emotional moment where all three guys kind of just stand there and look at each other like, what the hell's going on here? Like, I think that would be really cool, and if Nightwing and Robin know that Jason's alive, it kind of dampens that. And I think this would make for a really iconic moment when Jason takes off his mask, revealing himself to be Jason Todd. That would just be so cool. Like, that would be awesome. Having these three versions of these characters interact with each other in that moment would just be so special. Then I'd actually have them kind of have this like uneasy alliance thing going on, where obviously Tim and Dick are working together, but Jason's kind of off on his own, and Tim and Dick kind of have to reel him in a little bit, but obviously he's like, well, I'm not going to like conform to your rules because you're not Batman. You can't tell me what to do anymore. No one can tell me what to do anymore. I'm Red Hood. And I think, again, that'd be really cool to see Red Hood kind of be this rogue operative who, although he's like still killing criminals pretty brutally, I'd have him be pretty violent, Nightwing and Robin would kind of come to rely on him a little bit as the hammer of the group, like the one they just know will go in and clear house, but equally they're not happy with it. They don't want him to do it like that. And that's kind of one of the messages of this DLC. One of them would be Nightwing learning how to lead, the other one would be Robin learning to be Robin and not Batman, and obviously the other one would be Red Hood learning that he doesn't need to just kill everyone. He doesn't need to be like that. Gotham doesn't need another serial killer. This would all lead basically to a final confrontation against Black Mask, but before that I'd actually have a very Gotham Knights style moment where we see Dick, Tim, Jason and Barbara interacting with each other in the clock tower. I'd also have them like reminisce on Bruce and how he affected their lives, and obviously this would be a bit touchy for Jason Todd because he's not the golden boy Nightwing, he's not the replacement in Tim Drake, he's the one that got away sort of thing, and I think again that would make for some really, really fun moments. Not for those characters obviously, they'd be miserable, but for us as the viewer getting to see the Bat family interact with each other would just be absolute cinema. In this final confrontation against Black Mask, I'd have all three of them going together with Oracle on the comms. Nightwing would be leading the two other men. Robin would be sort of strategizing and really being Tim Drake. Like, he'd be the smartest one of the group, working the angles of attack out, working where they're going to go in, all for Nightwing to sort of coordinate, right, attack, stop, all that sort of stuff that Nightwing does, you know, he's a leader. And then obviously you'd have Red Hood, who, like I said before, would be the hammer of the group. He'd be the guy who just goes in full brute force, breaking people's bones, taking people out. And initially he wouldn't actually kill anyone. And Tim and Dick would think, wow, he's changed, we've changed him. But then obviously he'd get to Black Mask. Now, I saw this really cool thing on Instagram. It was this story about Red Hood giving a phone to this kid in the street, and the kid would have to press it if he was ever in trouble because he didn't believe that Red Hood would be there to save him. And as Red Hood is hunting down Black Mask, who's like the villain of the story, this kid presses the button, and obviously Red Hood has to decide whether he apprehends Black Mask or saves that child, and ultimately he decides to save the child. And I'd kind of have a bit of a similar thing to this, where Red Hood kind of, you know, he has to make that choice between does he take a life or does he do the right thing? And although it wouldn't have the same emotional weight as Red Hood in that story saving that kid, I think it would be a really nice moment to have Red Hood ready to kill Black Mask. Like, he's like, again, another callback to the Killing Joke, he'd be like, everyone can live apart from criminals like this. Like, he's peddling drugs through the streets that I grew up in, he's peddling weapons through the streets I grew up in, and he deserves to die. And he's holding the gun to his head, and Nightwing and Robin are like, Jason, like, you don't need to do this. This isn't the right way to do things. This is not what we do. If you do that, you're just as bad as him, if not worse, because you have a choice. He made his choice. You haven't made your choice. So make it now and do the right thing. And I'd kind of have Jason be the final one whose lesson would click. Like, by this point, I'd already have Nightwing established as a competent leader, and I'd also have Robin established as a competent Robin, not a wannabe Batman. And it's at this moment Jason would, like, holster his gun, knock Black Mask out, and then the credits roll, or he gets apprehended and the credits roll. I think that would be so fun, and the banter between these three characters could be really cool in open world missions or open world side missions. And yeah, I just think this would be such a much better way to do these stories, because all three of these stories can work together. In the main game, we see Red Hood kill people. We see Nightwing try and work out how to be this dual city protector. And obviously we see Robin try and be more like Bruce. But by combining them, you get all of that. You get all of that in like a 2-hour DLC, and you also get the formation of the Bat family, which we never really saw in the Arkham games. We never really see any members of the Bat family interact within these games, outside of like Robin and Batgirl in their DLC. And that's a massive shame, because these characters are really cool, and they're all really underused in this series. You could even, at the end, if you wanted to, tease Damian Wayne. Don't know how you'd do that, but they'd figure it out. You could tease Damian Wayne, and that could tease the Bat family game. I don't know. That's just my idea for how I'd fix Batman Arkham Knight's really weird DLC. Thank you for listening to this yap session. This obviously, I went off script a lot there, if you couldn't tell. There was no breaks. I just went. I do have a script, but you know, sometimes things don't go to plan, and I think I got the message across pretty well. Anyway, thank you all for watching so much. It does mean the world. Hit the subscribe button if you like this style of content, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, and stay safe out there.